risk analysis and contingency planning. Objectives. At the end of this presentation, the students will be able to identify and categorize internal and external risks that may impact the organization, determine the critical risks that require immediate attention, establish comprehensive contingency plans to address potential disruptions, identify alternative actions, backup resources, and communication protocols.
Risk identification is a crucial part of project management. Did you know that 61% of project failures are due to poor risk management? There are 5 common risk identification techniques: brainstorming, Delphi technique, SWOT analysis, expert judgment, and historical data analysis. Each has its own benefits and drawbacks. The steps of risk identification are: define the project scope, identify the potential risks, analyze the identified risks, prioritize the risks, and develop a risk management plan. Risk identification is the process of identifying and assessing the potential risks that may impact a project's objectives. It's important to identify risks early to develop a plan to mitigate them. Remember, identifying risks is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing process that requires constant monitoring and evaluation. So, take the time to identify risks, prioritize them, and develop a plan to mitigate them.
For individuals, life is full of unexpected events. This same is true for businesses as well. Unforeseen situations can have a minor impact, like increase in operating cost on the business, or can have major impacts also, like significant losses leading to closure of a part of the business or the entire business. Risk can be internal risk as well as external risk. Internal risks are the ones which are in the organization's control, like non-compliance to government rules, not securing employee or client data, office premises security breach, among other. External risks include those which are not in the organization's control, like political matters, bank interest rates, changing economic conditions of the region or nation, and so on. In this video, we will see what is the importance of risk management for big corporations. Easy to define organizational goals. If an organization has a risk management plan in place, it will be possible to define concrete goals for the future. When any risk will hit such an organization, the employees as well as management will have a fixed action list, and they will know what is to be done. Reduce uncertainty. It is said that risk comes from not knowing what you are doing. Uncertainty in any form is bad for the business. Knowing how and when your business is going to be affected will help you to reduce uncertainty. If you plan for risk management, you will be better prepared for adverse events and will suffer less losses. Carry out consistent and efficient operation. While planning for risk management, an organization can find out risks which could cause business to operate incorrectly. For example, if an organization is dependent on only one vendor to obtain certain material, and if that vendor is not able to supply the material on time, it will lead to inconsistent and inefficient operations. In risk management, the organization will find more than one vendor to obtain their material. Save money. When planning for risk management, the organization is likely to find out drawbacks, loopholes, and inefficiencies in its processes and operational methods. Having risk management plan will help the organization to deal with situations more effectively. This will be helpful in saving crucial time and money when any extraordinary situation occurs. Help protect organizations' resources. By having a risk management plan, an organization will be able to prioritize tasks and resources. This will allow workers to respond swiftly and correctly. Employees will spend more time working tasks which are essential for the organization to function correctly. Improves organization's image. When an organization has a risk management plan, the employees have a confidence that they are working in a reliable and secure organization. The customers, clients, and vendors have a level of assurance in that organization and want to continue with their association. This is useful in improving the organization's overall image, and the organization can hold itself to a high standard.
What is risk prioritization? Risks may be infinite, but sadly our time and budget are not. Risk prioritizing is the process of identifying the most critical risks so they can be addressed first. Priorities should be set using the likelihood of a risk and the potential impact it poses to the company. A major purpose of prioritizing risks is to form a basis for allocating resources. There are 5 categories which can be used to rank the effects of risk based on the potential severity of the damage. Tolerable risk. Insignificant risks that have a very low chance of harm. Low risk. Minor risks with a negligible chance of having negative consequences. Medium risk. Moderate risks that do not constitute a serious threat but nevertheless have the potential to cause significant harm. High risk. Critical risks that will seriously affect a project's success and have significant adverse repercussions. Intolerable risk. Risks that cause significant system loss and will necessitate terminating procedures, systems, or productivity. A risk prioritization matrix is a useful technique that, by focusing on the likelihood of prospective risks, can aid in risk evaluation. Using a risk assessment matrix, you can quickly determine the risk of your project. Here is an example of a simple risk matrix.
In this video, we will understand everything about risk mitigation and its strategies. Without any further ado, what is risk mitigation? Risk mitigation is the planning and creation of strategies and solutions to minimize threats to project goals or risks. A project team can adopt risk mitigation measures to identify, monitor, and analyze risks and the effects of a particular project, such as developing a new product. In addition to addressing issues and their impact on a project, risk mitigation also includes the implementation of countermeasures. This was just a brief introduction to risk mitigation. Top risk mitigation strategies with examples. Appropriate risk mitigation involves determining potential risks to a project, such as team revenue, product failure, and scope creep, and then implementing strategies to reduce or eliminate the risk. Here in risk mitigation planning and monitoring, the following methods can be used. First, accept and assume risk. The acceptance strategy might include cooperation among the team members to determine the project's potential risks and if the resulting consequences are acceptable. In addition to recognizing risks and their associated effects, team members can also identify and assume the risk's potential weaknesses. This method is widely used to identify and understand the risks that can impact the output of a project, and its objective is to bring these risks to the attention of the company so that everyone working on the project has a shared awareness of the risks and their consequences. Now, the following are some examples that illustrate how the acceptance strategy might be applied for frequently recognized risks. First, cost-impacting risks. The accept technique can be used to detect cost-affecting risks. For instance, a project team can use the accept method to identify risks to the project budget and develop measures to reduce the risk of going over budget, so that all team members are aware of the risk and its potential implications. Second, schedule impacting risks. The accept technique might aid in identifying potential scheduling risks, such as maintaining the project on schedule to reach the deadlines. Third, risks affecting performance. These sorts of risks might involve performance concerns such as team productivity or product performance, such as software or manufactured items, and can be recognized and acknowledged as part of the project planning process, so that all members are aware of possible performance risks. The second risk mitigation strategy is avoidance of risk. The avoidance strategy shows the accepted and expected risks and effects of a project, as well as the chances of avoiding such risks. Some techniques for executing the avoidance strategy include planning for risk and then taking precautions to prevent it. For instance, a project team can opt to perform product testing to eliminate the danger of product failure before the final production. Here are some other examples where avoidance strategies can be used. First is risk to schedule. By recognizing potential concerns that might have an impact on the project's timing, it is possible to avoid schedule impacts. Important deadlines, due dates, and final delivery dates can be impacted by risks, such as being too optimistic about a project's duration. The avoidance method can help the project team prepare strategies to prevent schedule conflicts, such as by generating a controlled schedule that shows exact time allocations for planning, design, testing, and retesting, as well as making any required adjustments. In order to prevent time management risks, it is also possible to schedule non-working hours. Second is risk to cost. Avoiding cost difficulties is another use of this method. For instance, a project team can outline all anticipated costs and account for any costs that can arise in order to avoid the consequences of going over budget. Third is a potential risk to performance. As a result of mitigating performance risks, such as insufficient resources to do the task, preliminary design, and bad team dynamics, a project team can find potential strategies to prevent these kinds of risk situations that can result in performance concerns. Next, to avoid the risk of product failure with less durable materials, a production team can test more durable product materials. Similarly, if there is a performance risk within the dynamics of the project team, interactive team management can be employed to prevent team difficulties. The third risk mitigation strategy is controlling risk. Team members can also implement a control strategy when mitigating risks to a project. This method works by taking into consideration risks recognized and acknowledged and then taking actions to mitigate or eliminate the consequences of these risks. Some examples that demonstrate how control measures can be used for risk mitigation are: first, controlling the risk of schedule. Diversifying tasks and the time required to perform them across the project team allows for the management of scheduling effects. Control techniques can include keeping track of the time required to accomplish each job and allocating particular tasks to team members based on the time required to complete each activity. The project team could also take into consideration time management measures to better reduce any risk to the project schedule. Second is controlling performance risk. Implementing control techniques for performance risk might involve means of guiding a team's daily work, quality control methods for new products, and measures for taking action to control problems that could influence the overall performance of a project. Third is controlling risks to cost. A project team can use control systems that might identify potential budget issues. For instance, controls for risk mitigation can include a focus on management, the decision-making process, or the identification of issues in the project's funding before problems arise. This can also provide insight into how money is being allocated, and if there is a danger of going over budget, the team can detect it in advance and take actions to limit it, such as lowering expenditure or deleting a resource that might be too expensive for the project. The fourth risk mitigation strategy is risk transference. When risks are acknowledged and considered, transference could be a suitable technique for limiting their effects. The transference approach is effective because it transfers the burden of risk and consequences to another party. However, this can have its own disadvantages, and when an organization uses this risk reduction method, this must do so in a manner that is acceptable to all stakeholders. The example that follows shows how and when risk reduction strategies use transference. First is performance transference. If, for example, a manufacturing team has created a new product, but it has faults, the product is defective. The faults cannot be due solely to manufacturing concerns, but rather to problems with materials obtained from an external source. Or, the company can pass the consequences to the outside vendor responsible for delivering the product materials by demanding the vendor to cover the expenses associated with product faults. Second is scheduling transference. While this is a risk in and of itself, transfer strategies can be utilized to place the weight of falling behind schedule on the team members responsible for time management, rather than on the company as a whole. With the consequences passed to the team members responsible for scheduling, the production team, design team, or other teams can concentrate on finishing their remaining tasks. Third is transfer for cost. Accountants and financial advisors can be held responsible for budgeting errors as part of the transfer of cost-related risks. For instance, a project that exceeds its budget can result in increased manufacturing costs and financing for supplies. If the repercussions are pushed to the finance teams responsible for budget monitoring, production managers and team members can concentrate on their jobs while the finance team addresses cost issues. The fifth risk mitigation strategy is monitor and observe risk. Monitoring projects for risks and consequences includes keeping an eye out for and recognizing any modifications that might modify the risk's effect. This method might be used as part of a typical project review plan by production teams. Cost, schedule, and performance or productivity are all factors of a project that can be monitored for potential risks that might arise throughout its execution. The following example shows methods for monitoring and evaluating risks and their potential impacts on the execution of a project. First is monitoring costs. A finance team or budget committee can examine and manage cost concerns by establishing a reporting routine that details each company's spending. This technique is effective because it enables teams to evaluate the budget and adjust any cost plans appropriately regularly. Second is monitoring schedule. Monitoring project schedules might involve weekly evaluations of each team member's tasks and the time required to fulfill each task. The team can then review and monitor any concerns that might affect the project's timeline. Software, such as calendars and project management applications, can aid in the monitoring and evaluation of time management and project scheduling. Third is monitoring performance. Monitoring the performance of a project's products, team members, and resources are examples of how performance monitoring can be implemented. Evaluating and measuring many parts of a company's performance helps limit risks of a weakening, and technologies such as productivity software can aid in tracking and evaluating performance processes inside the project. The performance of employees can be monitored through the design and implementation of regular performance reviews, and the performance of products can be monitored through continuous product testing and review. This was about the top risk mitigation strategies with examples. Now, let us move on to our next topic and discuss how to create a risk mitigation plan. There are a few steps that are generally standard when building a risk mitigation strategy for most companies. Recognizing recurrent threats, prioritizing risk mitigation, and monitoring the set plan are essential components of a complete risk mitigation approach. Here are 5 basic stages involved in the formulation of a risk management plan. First, identify all potential risk-presenting scenarios. A risk mitigation plan takes into consideration not only the goals and mission-critical data security of each company, but also any risks that can develop due to the nature of the field or geographic location. A risk mitigation plan must also include the demands of an organization's employees. Second, perform a risk assessment, which includes evaluating the potential risks involved in a projected activity. Risk assessments include procedures, processes, and controls for mitigating the risk's effect. Third, prioritize risks, which includes assessing measurable risk by severity. Prioritization is a component of risk mitigation, which involves accepting a certain degree of risk in one area of the company in order to protect another better. By setting an acceptable amount of risk for various areas, a company can better prepare the necessary resources for business continuity while delaying fewer mission-critical business processes. Fourth is tracking risks. Tracking risks involves monitoring risks as their severity or importance to the company changes. It is essential to have strong metrics for monitoring the risk's evolution and the plan's capacity to fulfill compliance requirements. Fifth is to implement and monitor progress, which includes re-evaluating the plan's ability to detect risk and modifying it as necessary. In business continuity planning, plan testing is essential. Risk mitigation is identical. Once a strategy is in place, it should undergo frequent testing and analysis to ensure that it is up to date and performing properly. Risks confronting data centers are in a constant state of evolution. Therefore, risk mitigation strategies must account for any shifts in risk and altering priorities. So, this is how you can create a risk mitigation plan. Now, let us move on to our next topic.
A contingency plan is designed to record, assess, prioritize, and mitigate potential risks that may cause adversities to an organization. Examples of such adversities include delay in meeting customer commitments, increase in safety issues, and decline in profits, all of which may negatively impact the organization. The purpose of a contingency plan is to ensure uninterrupted product or service deliveries, as well as safety of its personnel and infrastructure. By ensuring uninterrupted product or service deliveries, an organization will be able to gain good reputation, sustain trust, and maintain business continuity. Similarly, by ensuring safety of personnel and infrastructure, an organization will be able to avoid adversities and function efficiently without any interruptions. Any manufacturing or service industry, such as automotive, aviation, pharmaceutical, healthcare, mining, and oil and gas, must have a contingency plan to effectively meet customer expectations. Contingency plans for each of these manufacturing or service industries will be unique depending on their geographical location, size, weather conditions, and accessibility. In short, a contingency plan is a must for an organization to attain customer satisfaction, to maintain service and delivery excellence, and to ensure safety of its personnel and infrastructure.
Monitor and control risks. The last step in risk management is monitoring and control of the risk management activities that involves tracking identified risks, monitoring residual risks, identifying new risks, and evaluating risk process effectiveness throughout the project. The input to this process are risk register, risk management plan, and performance reports. Why performance reports are input to this process? Because performance reports in the form of an earned value analysis gives an accurate status of the project health and risk management effectiveness can be analyzed in the light of the project progress. The techniques used for monitoring and control of the risk are risk audits in terms of checking whether the project is really identifying risks and working on having a plan to resolve the risk or not. The other strategy is to do continuous risk reassessment, which is kind of a periodic review of the risk management plans. Risks are also one of the key discussion topics in project status review meeting, as team members can point out to new risks. Regular members also ensure that team members are aware of their responsibility to always look for new risks and opportunities for project. Reserve analysis is also done throughout the risk monitoring and control process to check if the new identified risk requires additional reserve to be added to take care of any eventuality. The outputs of this process are updates risk list. For example, some risks that are no longer applicable will get removed from the risk register. Any monitoring process also results in some corrective or preventive action to ensure that same mistakes do not get repeated in future. This process also results in organization process asset updates, like updating lesson learned database about best practices in risk management.
I know is not in her. She's a